Coordinator. I'm the Climate Action Coordinator for the League of Women Voters of Evanston, as Jennifer mentioned, and welcome to our program tonight. We're very happy to have a program on the City of Evanston's Environment Board. And I noticed that we have our Sustainability Coordinator for the city, Kara Pratt, with us. So thank you, Kara, for joining us. Most people think of the League in connection with voter registration and candidate forums, but the League also studies and takes positions on issues such as affordable housing, criminal justice, and climate change. This year, the League committed to helping the City of Evanston reach its Climate Action and Resilience Plan, everybody calls it CARP, goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. We are delighted to have two excellent speakers this evening. First, I will introduce each speaker, then they will make their remarks. If you have questions, as Jennifer indicated, either put them in chat or wait till the end, and we'll have plenty of time for further discussion. Cherie LeBlanc Fisher is originally from Connecticut, but she has lived in Evanston for over 20 years. She has a BA from Holyoke College and a Master of Environmental Management degree from the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. Cherie has worked as a social science researcher for the U.S. Forest Service for over 20 years. Her diverse interests are reflected in a range of projects she works on, which include both social science research and ecological and urban forestry field work. She started serving on the Evanston Environment Board in 2017 and became co-chair of the board in late 2019. In 2018, she started a parent green team at Dewey Elementary and worked with the school staff and parents from other District 65 schools to bring lunchroom composting to 6 elementary schools. Wendy Pollock worked for 35 years in the field of informal science education, beginning in the 1970s at the Carnegie Mellon Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh, and spanning many years as the DC-based International Association of Hands-on Science Museums. After moving to Evanston in 2010, she led community engagement for a National Science Foundation funded media project about the natural and human history of trees, and volunteered with several local environmental projects and programs, including working with the city's forestry division. She's currently a volunteer steward at the Ladd Arboretum and now serves as the co-chair of the Evanston Environment Board. Welcome, Wendy, and welcome, Cherie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I wanted to acknowledge that Cherie Garl is also attending tonight. She's one of the current Evanston Environment Board members. And I think, Elizabeth, that you are a former Environment Board member, is that right?
That's correct.
Great. Is there anyone else on the call who has served on the Environment Board? Then we just want to acknowledge you, Elizabeth, and thank you for your service. It's great that Kara Pratt is here too, because she probably can answer absolutely anything that Wendy and I can't answer tonight. So we're going to start giving you a little bit of information about the board itself. Wendy, could you advance? Thank you. So the basic goal of the Environment Board is to support Evanston's environmental goals, which currently focus on climate change impacts, reducing resource efficiency and moving towards zero net waste, and in general, protecting and restoring natural systems. The way that we accomplish this is by investigating issues and doing research and developing recommendations for the City Council. Sometimes we get requests from other boards, committees, and commissions, and or city departments, or Kara Pratt herself. Next slide, please. So the Environment Board is one of 26 mayor-appointed boards and commissions currently in the city of Evanston. This number 26 may seem like a lot, but it was consolidated back a few years ago from more than 50 boards. So a bunch were eliminated, some were combined, and the Environment Board survived intact. Let's see, so these are the people currently serving. There's a great diversity of environmental expertise among those on the board, including the owner of a landscaping company, a retired US EPA program manager, that's Cherie Garl. We have a corporate sustainability director, and a software developer who works in carbon accounting. Also, someone on the Indiana Dunes interpretive staff and various environmental educators. The people who serve on the board are supposed to have some sort of background in environmental issues, but there can be two members from the community who don't have any specific expertise, just a particular interest in serving on the board. So we meet the second Thursday of every month at 6:30. We are lucky to be joined almost every month by students from Northwestern who are doing either classwork or reporting for the Daily Northwestern, and they take notes and sometimes put articles in the Daily Northwestern about the board's work. So that's kind of neat. Let's see. Elizabeth asked us to talk a little bit about, oh, sorry, Wendy, do you want me to add anything about the board's general work before I go on? Okay. So Elizabeth asked us to talk a little bit about how we were appointed, what interested us, and what do we enjoy about serving on the board. So I'll start with that. So I work for the U.S. Forest Service, as Elizabeth mentioned in my introduction. I've worked for the Forest Service for more than 20 years. So I'm very plugged into environmental issues in the greater Chicago region. I do a lot of what's called partnership work and a lot of networking. And I try to keep on top of, you know, the major issues and concerns that are being addressed across the region at any one time. That said, my work and my expertise is skewed toward urban forestry. So that's really where most of my focus goes in my work, at least in my partnership work. So in 2016, after the national election, I was feeling concerned and discouraged that my interests in the environment and other issues were not going to be addressed very much at the national level over the next 4 years. So I decided to focus on local issues and to look for local places to do some volunteer work. And that included doing some things through my church, also starting the green team eventually at Dewey Elementary, as was mentioned. And then I saw a posting in a City of Evanston newsletter looking for people to serve on boards and commissions, including the Environment Board, where I think there were 2 vacancies. So it's a pretty straightforward process. You submit an application online and it kind of goes into a black hole. You don't hear anything, or I didn't hear anything for several months, but it is being reviewed and considered during that time. And then I was notified by then City Sustainability Director Kumar Jensen that I had been approved to serve on the Environment Board. So within a few months, I was attending meetings and fully a member of the board. Wendy, do you want to chime in and say a little about how you got here?
Sure. So, well, first of all, I thank you very, very much. And that's good to see familiar faces here. What I will just say, one of the things that I really enjoy about being on the Environment Board is working with Cherie and Cherie and some of the others. It's really a great and devoted group of people. I joined it in a somewhat oblique way, probably never to be repeated. So if somebody is interested in applying, it probably won't happen this way again. But because of my involvement with some of the local tree work, and I got to know, well, I actually got to know Eleanor Revelle, league member, who at the time was chairing a Citizens Greener Evanston task force on the environment. And through that, met people like Charles Smith, who's now leading the Jensen Gardens project, you may have heard of. And he was very much involved with the Ladd Arboretum. And the Ladd Arboretum at that time had a committee. And he asked me, why don't you join? So I joined. We got involved in making some trouble about some issues that were in front of City Council at the time. And the Ladd Arboretum Committee was dissolved, and 2 of us it was absorbed into the Environment Board, and 2 of us were appointed to the Environment Board at that point. So according to the city ordinance, actually 2 members are supposed to be familiar with arboretums going forward. So that's kind of an obscure purpose of the Environment Board, but I think important. So I will just say, Cherie mentioned getting involved in local issues as a, the one thing we can do, and at times of, of great frustration politically. And I will just kind of add, another dimension of that. From my experiences, I was born in DC and grew up outside of DC. I lived in a number of other places, but I lived in the city in DC for over 25 years. And as you know, as the League members, that we have taxation without representation in DC. And it makes you acutely aware, besides just being there at the seat of national government, very acutely aware of the importance of being able to govern yourself and being able to participate. DC had home rule only since the early 1970s. There was no mayor. And, we paid taxes and we have no voting representation in Congress. But it certainly made me aware of the importance of local government. And coming here, it was really just this great, kind of wonderful discovery that you could get involved here. And obviously, it's a much smaller place too. That helps. But I think that in these days, especially, it's just incredibly important to be involved in every possible committee, board, school boards. We know how crucial these boards and commissions are right now, and what happens locally. We absolutely have to keep our eyes on it. And I really value and appreciate the League's Observer Program, actually, because that's what you've been doing for a long time. And Elizabeth comes to our meetings sometimes and observes us. So we appreciate it. So I think we were going to talk a little bit about how agendas are set. You asked about that, and Cherie did mention some of the ways. Did you want to pick up and give some examples, Cherie, and then I can pick up on the climate part of it later?
Yeah.
Is that
sure.
okay? Yeah.
Yeah. So so let me just back up a little and say, so we're a volunteer board. We meet once a month, and that in between meetings, we're just ordinary residents trying to keep on top of things. So at each meeting, we often learn about what the Sustainability and Resilience Coordinator is spending her time on, what other city staff and departments are doing that relate to environmental issues, and what city council and council committees are doing that relate to environmental issues. And we also try to scan news from other communities, do research on topics that we're working on, that kind of thing. So we also form task forces and other subgroups, but I guess we can come back to that. So in general, we develop the agenda every month in consultation with Kara Pratt, the Sustainability and Resilience Coordinator. She's our main point of contact with city staff. Agenda items on each month may come from a variety of sources. They could come from city staff or city council requesting us to review, comment, or advise, and we can give some examples of these. For example, the city has to review its MS4 permit for municipal separate storm sewer systems every year. Every year they have to report out to the community, and they do that at our meetings. So they get in touch with us in advance, say it's time for us to give our report to the community again, and could we be on the agenda for the next meeting, for example. Also, the leaf blower ordinance that got attention, I would say, late last year and much of last year from various corners of the city. We helped research what was being done in other communities. We advised council. We were also a forum for interested residents to provide input on what they thought the leaf blower ordinance should be. And then the municipal zero municipal waste zero emission strategy, which the city paid a consultant to develop. They asked us to review the final report and recommendations and write a memo either recommending, there were 3 different tracks of possible ways forward that were suggested in the report, and they asked us to comment on which we thought was the best, and we recommended the most aggressive track, which would take the most action and push for the most ambitious goals, I would say, for decision making. Another way that things come to the board is community initiated requests for support. So I'll back up a little and say one of my first meetings when I served on the Environment Board, there were some members of District 65 Green Teams who were parents of elementary school students in Evanston. I was also a parent of an elementary school student in Evanston and had been for only a few months at that point. And when my daughter started school, I just assumed Evanston's a super progressive community. They're going to have, they're going to be really on top of environmental lessons and ecological teaching and using, there's something called the California curriculum that integrates concepts about interdependence and ecological principles into the curriculum in all subjects starting at a very young age. I just assumed Evanston had something like that. So these parents came to the Environment Board and talked about use of styrofoam trays in the school lunch programs in Evanston. And the statistic that made me jump out of my seat was that the city, actually the district, sorry, just in the elementary schools, was using over 10,000 styrofoam trays per week. So that was a single use for like 15 minutes and then all of them straight into the trash. And I was so horrified by that. I couldn't believe it. So that lit a fire under me to find out more about what those parents were doing in the schools where their kids were. And that's how I got involved in doing a green team at Dewey. And one of the first issues we took on was really pressing the district to do lunchroom composting, which they agreed to do. But they had us come in as green team parent volunteers and train staff, teachers, students, and administrators, all of them, on how to compost in the lunchroom. So that was one of my first examples of something coming in from the community to the Environment Board that really got me going and working on that issue in that context. So sorry for the long digression there. So we also hear sometimes from people in the community who have particular issues, including things like the air quality study that was done in Ward 5 that was related to the municipal waste transfer station that's in that area that was transmitting both noises and odors into the community in a way that was really disruptive for people who lived there. So there was a study done on that. We were consulted at various points during the study and then to provide comment afterwards on the study findings and results. Let's see, there are lots of other examples. Coal tar ban was addressed a couple of years ago by the board, and we helped update the city's weed ordinance to make it a little more flexible in terms of what's considered a weed that you can let grow in your yard without the city being able to fine you. And then finally, we have a lot of board initiated action items that are based on our annual goals and on our discussions and our backgrounds. Since 2019, these have focused primarily on the new climate action and resilience plan that was adopted by City Council in late 2018. Wendy, do you want to jump in and talk a little more about that?
Sure. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen really quickly. And while I'm doing that, I want to just say that Elizabeth is the reason that we picked up the coal tar issue again. So here we are. Let's see if this works. Oh, come on. Share. Okay. Yeah. So yes, Elizabeth had, as I understood it, when you were on the board, the coal tar issue, this is coal tar sealants used on roads. That was before the board and somehow got lost in changes in membership and so on. And she kindly reminded us that the board had never finished. And so we took it up and the league supported it very actively, and when it went before council and the ban was put into effect. Now, what's really occupied a lot of our time, and I know this was something that you're interested in over the last couple of years, is the Climate Action and Resilience Plan, known as CARP. Just a reminder, this plan is the latest of several different plans that the city has had to address carbon emissions and to address climate change. It was the result of a 17-member working group that was appointed by Mayor Haggerty, and the plan, they were time limited. They had 1 year to do this work. They finished and it was adopted in December of 2018. It has basically two parts. One part is various focus areas that deal with mitigation, in other words, cutting greenhouse gas emissions. And the targets, the one that really stands out, I think, is by 2035, there's a target of an 80% reduction in carbon emissions. And the other part of CARP is about resilience. So even if we reduced our emissions overnight, we are locked in, we're going to have for decades the consequences of the change that's already upon us. And so preparing for that is something that we have to do as a community. So these are the focus areas. You can find this report on the city website. And I think then, just to segue, let's see, I didn't want to show that yet. I'm going to stop sharing. So the task force was finished. Two of the Environment Board members were on the task force that produced the report. And, we may call on Cherie if we have further questions about this, but they had asked if they could continue their work in order to address, well, how is this plan going to be implemented? We all know that it's one thing to commission a plan, it's another to actually act on it. They were not continued, so the Environment Board basically embraced that role of doing whatever we could to push for the actual implementation of this plan. And two of our members were members of that working group, so they continued working on it. And Cherie Garl took on the role of leading what we call the CARP implementation task force. So that particular subgroup of the Environment Board works very actively in between our general meetings on a variety of fronts. One of the things that just another note, that subgroup, the CARP implementation task force, also includes representatives of Citizens Greener Evanston. So it is a community board appointed members of, council appointed members of the board and members of the community. But we follow the Open Meetings Act. So we meet, our meetings agendas and are posted, and our minutes are posted on the same page of the website as the Environment Board records are. So some of the things we've worked on, well, one is I have to say, been pushing and nagging everybody we can to please also commission what we would call an implementation plan, a roadmap. We've got these goals, we've got the activities. How exactly are we going to carry these forward? It's such a huge, daunting task that it's really very difficult to coordinate it. And as you've seen, there's one at this point, one staff person, Kara Pratt, who's here on the call, who has the role of leading that as a city staff person. That's an awful lot. So we have been, you asked about what are some of the frustrations, challenges. To do that, while we've had changes in the senior city staff and changes in the city council, the mayor, not to mention the pandemic that has made everything difficult, and it certainly contributed to the challenges and actually getting this plan implemented. However, I will say things are happening, and what the thing that Cherie mentioned earlier, I'll just see Libby Hill ask the question about zero waste issue. Just to answer that, I think it was actually municipal zero emissions strategies. That was what the report was about, and the recommendations, and the city council, I believe it was in planning and development, or administration and public works, I think, did receive the report and embrace, at least some of the members did, our recommendation that they follow the most aggressive path. Of course, that doesn't mean there's funding behind it, but there are many, many actions in that report, and you can find it on the city website. So other things, we spent some time working on what we would call a dashboard. We need not only to keep track of, with this myriad of actions that we have to take on to deal with climate change, how do we track everything? What metrics do we use to know how we're doing? And how does the city communicate with the community what's going on? So we worked as a task force and as a board on prototyping a dashboard, and that was an activity. We did research on ARPA, the American Rescue Plan. Was there any way that any activities that would support and advance implementation of CARP could get funded through ARPA? And we prepared some proposals and the rationale, did the research on the final rule, and we've presented those to council as well. Finally, I will say, and I'll see if I can quickly share the screen one more time. Finally, we determined earlier this year that we needed to do something to refresh the sense of urgency about actually carrying out this plan. When the council adopted it in December of 2018, it was unanimous. There was, great strong feeling behind it. But as I said, there were lots of changes and lots of challenges that happened after that kind of slowed us down. However, we have learned that more than, it's now, I think, close to it's well over 2,000 cities and towns all over the world, including many in the United States, have made formal declarations of climate emergencies. And we decided that we would propose that our city council adopt a similar resolution declaring a climate emergency here and committing to a number of actions that would clarify some of the responsibility for actually taking action and reporting on it more frequently to the council, to the public. So we are working on that right now. And as you all, as followers of current events, you no doubt know that the IPCC's Working Group 3 produced its latest report this week. It was focused on mitigation. It has not only more dire than what we've heard, but it also offers many, many avenues for action. And in that sense, offers hope. And I think the timing is perfect. We are working with some members of council and with a number of community groups that have endorsed this proposal of ours. And we hope that on April 25th, the council will take it up as a special order of business, adopt this resolution, and this is what the final language in our draft says. And along with it, we're also communicating with some members of council about, and with Kara Pratt, who's leading on the staff side, about a proposed 2022 agenda for action, both for the council and for staff on the programmatic side. So with that, I might just say if the League of Women Voters climate team would care to sign on to this as well, you are more than welcome. The signatories so far include, besides the Environment Board and Environmental Justice Evanston and Citizens Greener Evanston, E-Town Sunrise. We often have young people, by the way, coming, not just Northwestern, but from the high school coming to our meetings. District 65 Climate Action Team, Cherie mentioned, they've signed on. DPOE, Democratic Party of Evanston Climate Action Team has signed on. Citizens Climate Lobby, 350.org, Chicago chapter, and others. So I will leave it at that. The status of the dashboard. I see some questions coming in. So maybe I'll turn it back over. Shall I turn it over, Elizabeth, to you to see where we go with the conversation? We will also really would love to hear your thoughts and your priorities, anything that you would like to bring to the board's attention. We would really like to hear from you as well.
Let's open it up for questions. Do people have questions that are, now Libby, did yours get answered sufficiently? Sounds like it was.
I don't think you can see me. This is Fred Wittenberg. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I had computer problems and I dropped out and rejoined. And this is for Cherie with the Environment Board. I heard you through the leaf blower and styrofoam trays, et cetera, et cetera. So I missed about 5 to 10 minutes after that. I don't know what took place. But the styrofoam trays, there were efforts, 22 years ago, I attended 2 Environment Board meetings, interestingly related to leaf blowers. Okay, I have something to say about that. I have a lot to say, so if I'm hogging the time, please stop me. It was either, I don't remember who, this about 10 years ago, where there were efforts to replace in the schools the styrofoam trays with something that was more environmentally friendly, but I don't know where that went. Obviously, we're still doing this. We're still non-conforming. All right. Back to Cherie and the Environment Board. Certainly, we are environmental conscious, and we want to pursue whatever is necessary. What about air quality in Evanston? And in particular, I'm thinking there is an asphalt plant on Oakton, just east of the North Shore Channel, the south side of Oakton, that might be in Skokie. I'm not sure, but has anybody determined the effect of that, especially during the summertime with southwest winds and that plant operating? What is happening in the air that we're breathing? Relative to the leaf blowers, I used to cut my own grass. I can't do that anymore. I have a landscaper who was here yesterday. There were two uses of gas-powered leaf blowers, and I understand from now until May 15th it's allowed. Has anybody looked into the industry with regard to alternatives because of the ban starting April of 2023. I'm an engineer. I've been in environment for umpteen years. I'm a retired public servant with the MWRD, the last years of which were spent at the O'Brien plant at Howard and McCormick. I was the environmental person there at that time. Different set of issues. The first thing that I was subjected to was refrigerants, where we were replacing refrigerants, which add to the climate change. The original refrigerants were attacking the ozone layer, and so when I retired, I happened to notice that the substitutes, instead of an ozone depletion factor, now had a global warming factor. Nobody was paying attention to what was going on. So we're playing with that issue. There are many things here to be solved.
Fred, let's see if they can give you some more information on the leaf blowers. Okay.
Okay. I've seen ads not only for leaf blowers, but supposedly for, gang mowers, where there's supposedly a green machine that's chargeable that can be used for all day and so on and so forth. I'm also thinking of the workers that are using the leaf blowers. What alternatives? Battery operated leaf blowers just won't cut it. If the particular landscaper has a number of clients. I know there were 2 meetings here, one initially to address the landscapers, and I got a reverse, and the second one to listen to the people of Evanston. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend either meetings. All right.
Let's see if either Wendy or Cherie have anything they'd like to say now, please.
Thank you.
So I can jump in on both the issues of the styrofoam trays and the issue of the leaf blowers. I think those of us who focus really on environmental issues through our work or our personal work have been really frustrated for a number of years waiting for technology to catch up with where we think we need to be. And that was the case with both styrofoam trays and with leaf blowers. So with styrofoam trays, there have been alternatives available on the market for probably 20 years, just in terms of using cardboard trays. But there was no commercial composting option in Evanston. So there were a number of concerns about the trays that were available. They stuck together and were hard to separate. And so it made it inefficient to use them when you had a line of students moving through the hot lunch line and trying to do it quickly. They also, if they got soiled with food, they could not be recycled. So that made them this sort of nefarious material that nobody was sure what to do with, but we now have commercial composting in Evanston through Collective Resource Inc. So the school district was able to contract with Collective Resource to collect over food from the hot lunch line, but also all of the trays that were used for 15 minutes were changed to compostable trays. So that issue was solved once the technology caught up. And I have to say, there was a staffing person at Nutritional Services for District 65 who was on board with the idea and was willing to do some of the legwork and make some of the arguments within the district to get that done. So that's done. The leaf blower issue, I'm one of those people who immediately, when I heard about gas-powered leaf blowers being used all over the place in Evanston, said, well, obviously that's a bad idea. We should just eliminate them, but it doesn't turn out to be that simple. As Fred suggested, the technology had to catch up so that, if you have your own personal leaf blower that you use in your yard, and you can either plug it in or use a battery pack, you might use it half an hour at a time, a couple of times a year, but a commercial landscaping company is going to use it constantly all day for weeks and weeks, depending on the season. So sometimes they're blowing leaves and sometimes they're blowing grass cuttings or other removed vegetation. So we have someone on the board right now who's the owner of a landscaping company, and he was able to provide a really valuable insight into where the technology stood. And Northwestern, for example, the whole university went to battery powered leaf blowers a few years ago, but they're able to do that because their staff that use leaf blowers don't go very far from the garage out to the job, and they can come back to the garage multiple times per day and either plug in batteries for charging or switch out batteries, where a commercial landscaper is driving often from city to city across the region. They cannot return to their home base multiple times each day. There were also issues with the battery powered leaf blowers being powerful enough. They still have noise issues. So there aren't exhaust emissions, which can be harmful for the employees, but they still cause a lot of noise and can be a nuisance in neighborhoods. So we tried to factor all of that in our advice about how to update the leaf blower ordinance so that we can phase out gas powered leaf blowers, but in a time frame that is commercially viable for the companies that use them. That's all I'll say on that. Wendy, you want to add anything?
Thank
No,
you.
I think that was great. And I as you may have heard them going today, I did over in my neighborhood, but the city enforcement is under the health department, and they've produced a flyer. I've seen it in a 8.5 by 11 format, but I think they're also producing a door hanger that I think is really great. It focuses on the positive. This is when it's okay to use a leaf blower, and it is a shorter period of time than it used to be. It's later
Yes.
in the day, I think, by a little bit. And it says next year it's going to be different. By the way, in small print, there is a fine if you violate this. So they're really trying to educate and to take time. And, I think the process was, it was challenging, but it really was respectful of the workers too. And yeah, as Fred mentioned, it is a problem for worker health. And that was something that really concerned us too. It wasn't just that it's annoying when you're working at home, but it is actually not good for workers. So just like coal tar. So yeah.
We have a question about the status of the dashboard.
Oh, yes, that might be. If Cherie is willing to, Cherie, do you want to say something about that? Because you deserve to come on camera here. You have been so tireless, I would just say, in leading this group and this effort.
Well, thank you, Wendy, and Cherie also have been very active members in the CIT. So it's been a real commitment. The dashboard it's a really good question, because we've been benchmarking communities across the country who use communication tools like a website or some kind of a forward-facing or public-facing chart or graph that shows the degree of progress being made in meeting our climate goals. And in looking at Encinitas, California, who has a very interesting and colorful dashboard, as well as others, we found a consulting firm that we are interested in looking at just to see what could be done to help us out. So we're in very early stages of kind of investigating what's possible. We did attempt to do this on our own last year with a member of our group, but we found in some cases the CARP doesn't have clear metrics. So it's really hard to measure progress when you don't have a goal or a way to measure it. So we're looking at some tightening up the numbers and the ways of measuring so we can get to the dashboard. So stay tuned on that. Sorry for the vague answer.
There's another question about were you successful with getting rescue plan funds to help with your objectives for the CARP implementation?
Well, I think that's a question yet to be determined. As far as I know, that there's still an active process underway to consider, for the city council to consider ARPA recommendations. And so I think the answer is we'll see.
Okay. Any other questions out there?
I might just add to that response that the CARP implementation team did a lot of work to comb through, and Cherie, hats off to you, because I think you did a lot of it, comb through the ARPA language to see what kinds of projects could qualify, and then crosswalked that with recommended projects that were already on a list that the CARP team thought the city should implement anyway. So things like, Cherie, can you provide some examples of I remember there were 5 or 6 key recommended projects.
Right. There was an environmental justice Evanston project on to do an equity investigation on environmental inequities throughout Evanston. There was a project to I wish I had them in front of me. There was a project to fund solar panels on the rooftop of the water treatment plant. There was a
There were two involving urban forestry. One of them was oriented toward business districts and improving business districts with trees. So so at this point, I don't know if they're still being examined or not. That Cherie's response was perfect.
Well, we did, sorry, I'm trying to find these. We submitted them back in November. So they've been sitting somewhere, determining if they're eligible and how to make progress on them. But I'm going to find them in a minute so I can answer the question.
We have a question. Has any measurable progress been made towards achieving CARP goals?
Oh, absolutely. We've done a lot, actually. That the city of Evanston. Well, I can point to the zero emission strategy as one action that was recommended. There's building codes that are being reviewed and potentially revised. There is a zero waste committee of the Environment Board that is focused on making progress on our zero waste goals. There is a lot of excellent work that's been done. I would have to say, in my opinion, it's been more opportunistic, but that's kind of the nature of what we've been going through for the past 2 years. We have limited staff, we have limited funding, and a lot of other distracting priorities that are making it a challenge, to focus on climate. So I definitely don't want to leave the impression that we're not, that nothing has been done.
There's another question, which is still a little confused about your relationship with city staff and city council. Can you talk a little about how the board defines its agenda and what happens to your recommendations?
You want to tackle that, Wendy?
Well, I'll begin. How about I would say it's complicated and it changes over time depending on who's on the council and what the issues are that are before us. So I'm seeing the other question as well. In a way, when I think about this, I do think that some of what we do is to try to understand that question, actually. How is it that we can best work at this particular moment in time to try to advance a goal? Sometimes, if a staff person, and Kara, I really hope you will join and say something if you'd like to here, because good if you so Kara or her predecessor Kumar Jensen might bring something the board, wanting a sounding board, for example. So in that case, we might collectively provide advice. In essence, that's what we did with the zero emissions strategy document. We read it, we discussed it, we wrote a memo and sent it to council, and Kara used it in her presentation to it. It was the council committee, wasn't it, Kara, not the council itself? Anyway, that's,
Yes,
yeah.
it was.
So that's an example of one way. And there are other times when we try to address the council directly with recommendations. I would say we have the least success doing that, but we'll see what happens now with this resolution. We're working behind the scenes, trying to build support, trying to assemble support from the community. And so I think it's like advocacy work in that sense. Sometimes we've worked, like with the leaf blower example, where a couple of us have basically been delegated to work with, in this case, it ended up being a couple of council members, just doing some research, assembling it, talking it through. So the subgroups are really important. So it's a combination of research, advocacy, review. Cherie, what do you want to elaborate or?
I would say both working with Kumar Jensen and with Kara Pratt, they are both super forward thinking, really well educated people who have ambitious goals for Evanston's climate policies and plans. But they have their departments of one. Kumar did have some fellows working with him and some students who worked temporarily, but Kara so far is largely on her own. So I think a big part of the environment's role is to learn about what she's doing, to support what she's doing, and to ask how can we support and advance what you're proposing or what you're doing. I also think we have invited city staff to come and talk to us. And one example is I have a personal interest in green infrastructure. And so I was feeling very frustrated about why isn't the city doing more green infrastructure projects? So, instead of putting in a new stormwater system that's all pipes and engineering, why aren't they putting in rain gardens, or why aren't they doing things that improve the environment in Evanston rather than just falling back on engineering solutions? And so Dave Stonebeck, who's was head of public works, came to one of our meetings, and I was all set to grill him and take him to task on like the city really has a bad track record on this. And his responses were super thoughtful and way more advanced than I was expecting. And one of the things he said is that a large part of Evanston has sandy soils and that are not suitable for the kinds of green infrastructure installations that you're talking about. Something I had never even considered, even though I work in the field. I just didn't think of that. We also heard at the most recent MS4 system update that came from, what's his name?
Daryl King.
Daryl King, thank you. Also with Public Works. He comes once a year and gives us an update on his MS4 required report. And one of the things he said this year is that they are taking into account the environmental justice resolution that passed last year as they make decisions about replacing pipes and what parts of the city to prioritize for work, which blew me away. I thought was wonderful, and I had no idea. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the city that we, we're always playing catch up to learn about it. One of the things that's really important in the proposed climate emergency resolution is it requires city staff, when they write a memo proposing anything that will cost money or make significant programming changes, they have to say how it will impact the environment and or respond or not respond to CARP goals. So there's accountability built into that in terms of getting all city staff to be pulling in the same direction on CARP. So that doesn't mean that they can't request money that doesn't, directly address a CARP goal, but it will give us a way to track what's being done and what's being spent and how it is helping or not helping advance CARP goals. You could say a lot more, but I'll stop there.
I want to say too that I think in the next year we're going to see a lot more visible evidence of action. A lot of what we've been talking about, a lot of what the city's been doing is laying the groundwork. And one example, Kara, would you mind telling about the federal money that we're expecting for the,
Sure. So my understanding is that because of the change in federal administration and changes in Congress, they've brought back the earmark process. And so each fiscal year, senators offer an application so that requests can be made for that sort of discretionary funding. And so instead of a traditional grant, a traditional federal grant that has a lot of different restrictions and a really cumbersome application process, it's much shorter and it's really targeted towards projects that otherwise would not be funded. So more sort of innovative projects that could fall through the cracks. And so around this time last year, Kumar worked with the mayor to submit a proposal for solar installation for low-income residents. And the request was for $1 million, and we got half of that, so $500,000. And we haven't gotten really any other details besides that we were awarded that funding. So we're still working out exactly what the rules are and look forward to, I suppose, lobbying for Evanston every year for projects like that.
thank you. And thank you, Senators Durbin and Duckworth.
We have time for one last question, which is a challenging one. Who was ultimately responsible for establishing the metrics, cost estimating, budgeting, assessing buildings for energy efficiency, updating emissions measurements, and measuring the progress of partners in CARP such as Northwestern and the hospitals?
So Elizabeth, I was hoping to answer that question because I think that is the key question. And I want to thank Paula for asking it. I think it's all of our responsibilities. I think it's the city of Evanston. I think it's the city council. And I think it's every single resident, community group, nonprofit, and business. How we pull this all together and make it make sense is a really hard thing that we've been working on for a couple of years now. But I have to say, I strongly believe it's a distributed responsibility that we all need to take on. I know that's not a satisfying answer. It'd be nice to point a finger, but I think we all have to figure out how to do our part. Wendy and Cherie, could you give maybe a more pointed answer?
I'll say, one of the challenges of CARP is that the city has limited jurisdiction over private businesses, nonprofits, institutions like Northwestern and the hospitals, and the school districts for that matter. So one of the things that the Environment Board has really pushed for is for the city to lead by example. So we want to see the city's vehicle fleet go electric before everybody else's to show that it can be done. We want the city to eliminate gas-powered leaf blowers and do forward-thinking things with the building code to show that it can be done, so that the areas where they do have influence, they are being as green as possible and pushing others in that direction as well. I would say for places like Northwestern and the hospitals, they have their own incentives to become more climate friendly in terms of business operations and savings and the kind of pressure that they're going to get from their constituents over the next few years. So it's just a matter of getting everybody who cares about these things to move in the same direction on the same issues and put pressure on the people who can make the decisions and the policies and the programs that will make a difference. I think that's the full court press that Jerry's talking about.
Well, thank you so much, Wendy and Cherie, for your wonderful presentations. And thank you, Jerry and Kara, for coming and helping us with some of the information we needed. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks to the league, and thank you for inviting us.
Yes, this was a lovely invitation. It's great to talk with you.
Thank you.